We're back in combat-based garage. Boom. There's no video. I screwed up and forgot the hard drive.
Oh, Tobin.
Wait, hold on a second.
Huh.
Can you make sure you didn't get that part that I just said? That it doesn't come on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. We
Do
can
you know what I'm
restart
talking
right
about?
now.
Can we restart?
Yeah.
Okay. Make sure you don't get that part on there.
Okay.
Because I really like that guy.
Okay.
He's
Okay.
really sweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Restart.
Restart.
I don't talk crap about people I like. Okay.
Just Choi.
I don't know Choi.
Fuck Choi, dude.
Choi. I don't know karate.
Choi.
I just know crazy.
Choi's got all these moms thinking I'm not as badass as I am.
Yeah, I heard that he's
All
the
the
one that
school
started the
moms?
lie.
Okay.
All right, here we go. We're back at the combat-based garage for another pod. I screwed up, and it's going to be an audio-only pod.
What?
And I look really cute today.
I know.
What?
Darn.
It's a travesty.
A
But
great
anyhow.
failure.
Extra special makeup.
Yes. But anyhow, I'm Tobin, the producer. We got the CEO, Melissa Haueter, 3rd degree, black belt femme fatale. What up?
Killing it. Slaying. Another day of slaying.
Yeah, girl. Slay, girl.
Slay, baby.
We got the venerable Chris Haueter.
Sup?
What's up? We are...
So, yeah, what is today's pod on?
Today's pod is on ego.
Ego.
We're talking about ego today.
Your ego is not your amigo.
That's what I've heard.
Usually not.
I'm confused.
I just like saying that.
I'm confused about ego because I feel like people talk about it as some negative thing. I feel like I also hear people talk about ego as like your sense of self.
Well, yeah, we got to first get through colloquial definitions, actual psychology, PhD definitions, to casual use of it. I think it's one of those terms that's often misused.
Yes. So I got some of that. I did my
Did
AI
your research. All right.
breakdown on ego. Okay. So in the context of psychology, ego refers to the part of the personality that mediates between the id, which is the primitive desires, and the superego, the moral conscious,
Yes.
functioning in the conscious, preconscious, and unconscious mind in order to help us deal with reality. A more
Yes.
detailed explanation. Yes, go ahead.
Came from Sigmund Freud, who could arguably say is the father of modern psychology.
So the Freudian perspective, Sigmund Freud, a prominent figure in psychoanalysis, developed the concept of the ego as part of his broader theory of personality. The ego, according to Freud, develops from the id. Remember, that's the
Primal,
desires.
childish, selfish part of
It develops from the id and ensures that the impulses of the id can be expressed in a manner acceptable in the real world. The ego is the personality component responsible for dealing with reality, acting as a reality principle. Okay, so then another bullet point is ego as a sense of self. The term ego is also used to describe a person's sense of self-worth or self-importance. An inflated ego or big ego can be associated with arrogance, pride, or defensiveness. Ego can be fueled by insecurities and past experiences. Ego in relationships. Ego can negatively impact relationships by promoting selfish decision-making, prioritizing personal needs over others, and hindering empathy. Recognizing and managing one's ego is crucial for healthy relationships and personal growth. Other meanings of the word ego can be refer to a specific brand. Oh, never mind. Sorry. Okay, so that's negative stuff, right? Ego is a positive sense of self and a sense of image that is positive. It could be a method of self-accountability, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's the AI breakdown on ego. Okay.
So yeah,
What do you think?
I'm going to jump right in. Like this is one of those topics that I'm sure I'm not the only one who's thought a lot about ego. Martial artists think a lot about it. competitive people in any field think about it, whether it's competition academics, competition athletics, whatever it is. Ego is a very common topic of people either having what we call an unhealthy version of the egomaniac, or the more healthy version. And I think all too often people see ego as almost a negative word. It's almost become a thing where it's a pejorative sense rather than a balanced sense. Like in a more Hegelian thing, the id and the superego is balanced by the ego, right? And like a very common thing, and I'm sure some listeners out there have explored psychedelics, and one of the effects that people say of it is ego death. It is one of the things that people have a transcendent experience after a heavy mushroom trip or LSD trip or peyote trip, and if you're properly guided with a what do they call them again, the mentors that
Shaman.
yes, that you experience ego death, and in essence you reassemble a healthier version of ego. And that's like one like way to understand what ego is. Now, me personally, I haven't had any psychedelics in ages, but I definitely have like, whenever I hear people describe that experience, I'm like nodding, like the only beneficial drug I ever did was that. Not that it was fun, it was painful and intense, and
Drugs are
often
bad.
drugs are bad. Yeah, I'm not like being an advocate, but at the same time, if there's a way to control that experience, I think people come out of it healthier.
They do that though. I
They
think
do.
it's a thing,
It is.
right? Where
Yep.
like I know that like I know of certain people who have done LSD, and I've heard of it
Yes.
as a treatment for mental health
Yes.
problems. The other thing that I'm thinking too is that it's not the ego that's the problem, it's one's relationship to their ego.
Yes.
So keeping your ego in check to make sure that it's not, the ego isn't the like mature adult aware self running the show. So it's kind of like that movie Inside Out.
Yeah.
We just went to Disneyland, to a Disney thing yesterday, to California Adventure. And that Disney movie, Inside Out, where there's all
Very
the
well
different
done.
emotions running the show, it's like there has to be some aware adult running the show. Otherwise, the ego gets out of control and it's not in check.
You have to become your own parent, your own wise adult. Religion, often they say, depending on which kind, because there's all kinds, but in the monotheistic ones, the God, in essence, is who acts as that mature adult. Like in your mind, you're hearing, oh, don't do this selfish act because God, you feel the presence of God. And when you go into pure altruistic action, you are closer into the spirit. And I haven't studied this part of religion in a long time, but I've heard really good lectures on the spirituality part of religion, that even though I'm not religious, that's like the positive part. But the ego part of religion tends to be what we associate with as being the negative part of any religion. And all too often, people who are anti-religion miss that positive part, which is helping your brain develop within it the moral compass. And that's, I think, comes from having a healthy ego, having a moral compass.
Isn't that kind of the super ego? Isn't that what
But
Freud's
that would be,
describing as the super ego? It's the
yes,
moral conscious,
yes,
is what he says. It's the moral conscious that like balances out your id,
balances
which
out
would be
the
your
id, yeah.
Little
following your primitive
Yes.
instincts.
kind
and
of
stuff
like
like
inner
that.
child.
I guess so, or like lashing out
Yes.
whenever you feel angry.
It's
or
your
something
little
like
child.
That. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your inner child.
Your
Everyone
inner
has
child.
one.
But
Your
so,
inner brat. If I ever find him, I'm going to strangle him.
so what is? I feel like when people colloquially like say that person has a big ego when they're
What
being
they
a
mean
dick.
is id.
Maybe, yeah.
Almost.
Or something, or the person's just an asshole.
I
right?
think they usually mean what in psychoanalysis we would call the id. When they're going, oh, that dude's an egomaniac. Really, he's an id maniac. And the saint is the superego.
Right.
And the balance of that is the healthy ego.
Right.
Because I think in modern psychoanalytic theory, which a lot of it comes from Union and then Lacan and all those others, is you can't be completely id or completely superego, and that ego is that Hegelian balance.
Well, it's like Tobin was defining earlier. The ego, we can have it in check and it can be positive, right? Or it's out of check and then the person with the big ego is full of themselves. They're arrogant. That's what we're referring to.
We're referring to, yes.
And then your ego is so big and arrogant that, let's say you lose to someone who you didn't think you should lose to, and you freak out, and then your id comes out.
That's your id.
Because you thought, oh, I'm so cool, I'm so good at jiu-jitsu, I'm so this, I'm so that. There's no way that this taekwondo person's going to beat me. And then the taekwondo person knocks you out, and then you just fall apart and your id really comes out.
It's not going to happen. He's not knocking you out. Just wait till he gets these hands wrapped around him.
Yeah, on a little side talk that was spoken off air, there's a potential taekwondo master that might challenge Tobin.
No, Tobin might challenge him.
Tobin might challenge him.
I don't think potential side guy is going to challenge Tobin.
I think he wants the smoke. He doesn't want the smoke.
Yeah, that guy don't want the smoke.
No, I don't think so.
But Tobin's ready. Just saying.
I should storm him.
20 years ago, this could have been before the world became aware. Watch out for those jiu-jitsu guys. Yeah. It'd be like, what?
Yeah,
those
well,
guys
if
that
he
put
was
people
down
between their legs, are you kidding me?
If the guy was down, I think it would be excellent.
It would be. It
would be excellent.
We could definitely have it in the garage, privately filmed, even live streamed.
And maybe his ego is too big that he wouldn't be willing to take it, but I think Tobin could handle it. I'm not saying Tobin would win because I don't know this guy.
That's right.
I would win.
Okay. But if he lost, then we would know that it was just his ego.
Then my id would take over.
Maybe his id would take over, and maybe he would have a super ego that would keep it in check, and he would realize next time that we can't just run around thinking we're going to win just because the other guy does taekwondo.
Taekwondo guy has too much to lose in this scenario.
That's the other thing. So, I think when we're speaking about ego, what we're talking a lot about is our perceived reputation of self. How we view ourselves, our spot. Which leads to back when we were talking about challenge matches, dueling. I believe we humans as pack animals are so predisposed to what we think of as shame. And the bigger our ego is, then when we lose, the more shame we experience. And because we're animals that must live collectively in a tribe. And that fear of being cast out of the tribe can become so unhealthy that we create an ego, our perception of who we want the world to see us as. It even, in any spiritual movement or religion, which we've all seen on social media as well, we can spot the humble braggart. They can't see it.
I love those people.
They're funny.
False humble.
You're I just had to tell everyone how humble I am in that I turned down a guy who was trying to fight with me because I realized I am now too skilled and must. Like that. We can spot that in every area, and I often wonder if the humble braggart can spot it. And then I'll go, God, am I that guy? Have I ever been that? Faking how humble I am when really it's all my ego, right? And that's I think and that's definitely comes with religious clergy. Like I always think of the Christian pastor as like they have to really protect themselves against becoming egomaniacs because everyone's calling them such spiritual gurus, and then they start believing they're gurus, and then whatever their flaws are, they have to hide them because to expose those would mean you're not as spiritual as your group believes, your flock, and it can be a thing that leads to cult-like behavior, which we also have seen.
And the same thing with jiu-jitsu instructors. Everyone's praising you. Oh, you're so good. You're so good. Then you don't want to get beat. So then you
Yes.
stop
Competing.
saying that you're going
Or-
to, you see somebody in the room who you think might beat you. Of course, you're not going to train
You
with that
dodge
person
them. Yep.
because you don't want your students to see that you are not as the
Right.
best.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess
You become a dodger.
as we're going through this, I'm sort of realizing that when we're talking about ego, and we say someone has a huge ego, it just sort of seems like the ego, simplistically, you can say it's your sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get such a strong sense of self, like you're like, this is who I am this, I do this,
To arrogance.
it kind of inflates into arrogance because you're so focused on yourself
Yes.
that like you all of a sudden see yourself as so important because you're so well defined in your mind.
Yeah.
And then other people start to seem less important because they're not well
Yes.
defined. You don't know who they are.
And it leads to
And it leads to
narcissistic
this
behavior.
type of
Yeah.
shit. Yeah. So I could see how even if you were void of negative characteristics, but you had a strong sense of self, quote unquote, like really strong, you could inflate to this spot where you like become like
without
like
even
you
knowing.
think you're super virtuous, and you sort of
Yes.
all of a sudden start to pedestal yourself.
Well, I would
And
say
that's the
that
big ego.
I
good or
would
bad.
say
Yeah.
having a strong sense of self, I would think that that would be a good thing to have if you are not self-obsessed.
Yes.
So that's the difference. I want to be aware of myself and also aware that myself is constantly changing because
Right.
to me, the only constant is change.
Yeah.
So being able to grow with myself and have self-awareness without self-obsession.
That sounds very right.
Yeah, years ago, when I was kind of trying to pursue Eastern religion, like of course my own version, but because I have to do everything my own version, I can't do anybody else. Like I have that weird, I got to do it. But there's a meditation practice which is really hard to do, where you literally try to think all about others and other life, like not think how it relates to you and all that, to escape in a complete altruistic mind frame. And the point is you realize it's impossible. It's like you're always going back to, how does that affect me? How does that affect me? And to like get out of that is really hard.
It is.
Even when you think I'm thinking only of the children.
Yeah.
Like, are you really? Like, it's that weird place that I'm sure that this psychoanalyst like Lacan, like, I wish I would have boned up on him pre this show, like really goes into that, like what is true altruism, and is it even achievable? And it's like we all have an instinct. We all have a save our own ass instinct. At the same time, we see a 3-year-old that's about to walk in the traffic, we will risk our lives, like most of us. And those competing drives, and they really are root instinct. And humans that would risk their own life to save the children was a gene that was a very successful gene that passed on. And it's true with all pack animals. And like when you watch those really cool animal programs where sometimes even other species will intervene to protect, not because they're thinking like analyzing it, it's just they have an instinct that says don't, like, stop the people picking on it. Like, we humans hate who we perceive as being the bully. But how do we become the bully? sometimes by thinking we're the ones protecting against. That's when it becomes like within ideologies, like the extreme wings of ideologies always see themselves as the hero defending either their people or whatever it is, because it's driven by fear of the other. And then when there's not enough of the other around, it's the enemy within. And that's when you're trying to figure out who's not the purest amongst our ideological tribe. We need to cast you out of the tribe. And that's like where that group think becomes a scary thing. And like, I have a weird thing, and whenever I'm in closed areas where there's a lot of people, like crowds, like concerts, or like I feel like scared, because like my brain always imagines what would happen right now if an explosion is over there and everybody's rushing for one exit, who would get trampled, or like, and when I hear those horrors that happen because there was an unregulated rave where they only had one entrance exit, they packed in 10,000 people and a fire began, I get the EBGBs, like thinking, because I know how uncontrollable mobs can be, and it scares the shit out of me. Mobs scare the fuck out of me. Any type of a mob, and especially ideologically driven mobs, because those can be controlled by people who can manipulate the power of mob mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm thinking about how the ego can make you think that you're doing something good when you're actually doing something bad. Like you can turn yourself,
or doing something narcissistic.
Or it's so good that you got to yell at a bunch of people to make sure that they see how good it is.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I
want credit for how selfless I am.
I also wonder sometimes, how is altruism good all the way? Like, would it be good for you to be completely altruistic? Because I feel like if you remove, because you are important too, and
Sure.
you have to take care of you. You couldn't just give yourself wholly, right? If everyone was just giving themselves to the group, then there would be nothing. You know?
That whole analogy when you're on the plane, you put on your mask first, because if you don't put it on, you die. You can't help a kid who can't figure out, like, there is that. But like, altruism, like, God, I wish I had the words. We're putting value on something that we should try to look at as objectively as we can, without trying to say, is this good or bad? Mm-hmm. What is it first? And then how is it sometimes good and how is it sometimes bad? Yeah. Not whether it's intrinsically bad or good, it's prospectively bad or good. And then that opens up that whole postmodern window, which really began with Einstein, even though people like to say it started with the French postmodernists. Like in one sense, yes, but people who hate postmodernism is because they're looking at it as if like, I objectively believe that things can be subjective or objective. That's the error. It's like, you have to get out of your own self thinking that you're totally objective and other people are not.
I think that we make choices in our life and how we want to set them up. And I do believe that there may have been people on this planet at certain times who were purely altruistic, and they devoted their lives to being altruistic. Yeah. And they're like Jesus and Buddha and saints and Mother Teresa and stuff like that. But if you choose to
they had a moment. It might not be their whole lives.
It could have been their whole lives. Who knows? But my point is that if you choose to like have a family and you have other responsibilities, maybe you can't be that person, because you have to make sure that you're like available to be present for that. In a way,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the scenario where I'm like, I don't think it's good.
Not for us,
completely altruistic,
right?
You know?
For us, I don't think so. But these people who maybe like that was saints, their life, they're saints. Their life mission was just to serve others.
And I know someone hearing this right now is fucking screaming, Mother Teresa was not a saint,
I
because
think she is.
they call her one, but she did things like let children suffer and die when there was health care options, because
She
it would
did?
make, yes, if there's, look up Mother Teresa is not a saint on YouTube, and you will see historical facts where she's anything but a saint. That she like rejected things that would have obviously helped not only individuals but the collective, because you can't do abortion, or like whatever it was, where we can't have vaccines, like whatever it was, she was objectively not all good,
So why do people think she's so good?
because the Catholic Church elevated her and promoted her to being a saint.
So it was marketing?
Yes. And
We'll have to do some more research on that.
do just a light little dive, and like I think anybody would, from their perspective, objectively say, from my perspective, she definitely was not a saint.
Well, somebody was a saint.
But
What about Jesus?
what? Well, we're
Let's
opening
not
up
go
a
there.
can of worms.
Let's not go there.
Because we got to discuss who he is. Was he the Son of God? Did he actually exist? What are the historical facts that he did? Did he have a moment of selflessness, or was it his whole life? So when he was 5 years old, he never threw a tantrum. I mean, like, what are we? It's too complex.
And we
of a
don't
thing.
have a record to really tell
Right.
all of that
Yes.
stuff, because it was too far in the past.
And there are.
But I'd like to believe that some people are truly selfless, and they're saints.
I believe that people have selfless moments,
There you go.
but I don't think
I could get on board with
people
that.
are pure selfless or pure selfish. I think even the stubborn, narcissistic prick could have redeeming moments, right?
Totally. Yeah, people are complex.
They're complex.
Let's reel the ego back onto the mat,
All right.
because
Yes.
I feel like you hear
That's
people
what people
say,
are listening for.
you feel like people
OTM.
say, jiu-jitsu is so humbling. It's this humbling thing, and then I see people just go like way
Nuts.
out of control ego-wise, and it feels to me like the humility component on the mat with the building your ego is kind of a nice little binary thing, a yin and yang
A
thing
growth
going
tool, a
on.
yin and
Yeah,
yang
growth tool.
growth tool.
Where it's
yeah.
like you got to have enough ego to drive you to not want to just give up all the time, and to go like, oh, I can, a sense of self that's driving you to keep trying and to have motivation and to be striving for whatever your vision is of yourself. But if you let that get too out of control, at the end of the day, the dog's going to bite you, and you're going to get tapped, and you're going to be, if your ego is way crazy, then you're going to lose it, And we've seen that a couple
I just
times,
know,
right?
like, as for
Bunch
me, my own experience, being 60 and having some chronic injuries, like, I find that really humbling. Like, humbling to a point where I'm like, wow, I had a bigger ego than I thought. I thought I was humble 20 years ago. I wasn't. Like, I held myself to a much higher standard of who in reality I was, like in my head, right? Like,
but wasn't that a good, like, you got to strive for something to get somewhere, right? So if you think you're striving for this idea in your head, and that's level 100, you're probably only going to get to level 70 or whatever in reality. So like, if your 100 is up here, your 70's here.
Yeah.
If your 100 was down here, your ego being lower, say, your 70's down here. So it's good, right? It drove you to be,
because it's relative on a spectrum. Right? And yeah, it's I definitely think the selfish drive to achieve anything can be totally healthy. To become the scientist who discovers the cure for cancer, like that might be a pure selfish drive. Not only do you love science, but you want your name in the history books, and these dueling passions, and you get a little bit lucky and think it was all skill, or like whatever it was. That can be like a positive result from a selfish drive. And you could also have an altruistic drive that ends up in negative results. So it's kind of both.
Okay, so jiu-jitsu, I see the white belts come in, they get tapped out, tossed around, all this stuff for a long time,
For a long
maybe
time,
years, right?
Yes.
And they are humbled.
They are humbled.
And then they gain skill and they start to be able to defeat black belts. And then the ego comes in and says, I just learned this thing that was so freaking hard. And now I'm badass and I am so good at it. So now I've got this ego thing.
Yeah.
And I stick at it and I continue. And the ego, it ebbs and flows, right? Because it's kind of like by the time if you're a good and competitive purple belt, you get to that point and you're cocky.
You mean the blue belt gains? You went from white to black.
Yeah, I skipped blue belt. I said for years you're getting tossed around.
Yes.
That's the white and the blue belt is getting tossed around, and by the time you get to be a decent purple belt,
then you're
starting to hang with black belts, and you think you're so good and you know it all.
Yep.
That's your ego's huge.
That's the cockiest part.
And so hopefully going through the transition between, like Chris says, you see the maturity happen at brown belt where you gain like confidence rather than cockiness, but your ego can still be rather large, and it can exist for a long time, even though you might think, like Chris said, he thought that it was in check. You might think it's in check until you get old.
Yeah.
Then you realize that you have to have kind of this parting with the ego. You got to have a discussion. Do I want to be wrapped into my ego, or do I want to keep training? Yeah. This is the choice, because now I am old and I'm super beatable and I will never be what I once was. Yeah. Unless I do some major hormones and something. I don't know what.
I definitely see that arc. I just feel like you're still talking about it in terms of like not having the ego. Whereas like I feel like the reality is that you still have a strong ego, but it's in check, like you said earlier.
Yes, so
it's more like checking the ego, not getting rid of it. Because
so what we're saying
I have seen some
super ego. Okay.
I have seen some situations where people say like, come to jiu-jitsu and completely release yourself of your ego.
Leave your ego at the door? That was a thing.
And I'm like, what the fuck is that all about?
That was a quote
seems kind of
that
creepy,
I brought into, but I swear it was me, and it comes from 12-step programs.
So,
and I brought that into the Machado school, and they loved that quote. So
I feel like I don't like that quote. That quote kind of creeps me out because it feels like it's a organization telling you to forget your sense of self so we can influence you.
But I think that when people hear ego in colloquial conversation,
they hear arrogance.
That they hear arrogance. So if we're defining it by slang and not by studying psychology at college, like most of us have taken psychology, right? Haven't you? I have. Taken Psych 101 at college.
Yep.
Basic class, you learn about Sigmund Freud and but not everybody thinks that way. People think ego equals arrogance.
Yes. Yeah.
So when we refer to it, we have to define what we're talking about. So leaving your arrogance at the door, that doesn't sound as good as leave your ego at the door.
Right.
But really, that's what.
But it's more accurate.
What is meant is leave your arrogance at the door, humble yourself, But here's the other thing too. Sometimes we do have to set ourselves aside to be open to experiencing things, gaining more knowledge, and then we take that back outside and reincorporate that into ourselves. Yeah. So if I am an alcoholic and I can't stop drinking, and that's part of my ego problem, I have to set my ego sense of self, me being the person that excessively consumes alcohol on a daily basis, I have to set that aside so that I can be open to something new.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely have felt this in effect as a black belt in jiu-jitsu, where when I was a lower rank, I loved going to other schools and like just exploring. It just felt so...
You got everything to win, nothing to lose.
Everything to win, nothing to lose. Yeah. And since being a black belt, I feel the internal pressure I'm putting on myself to not go to other places and not train with new people.
And so many black belts do that.
That's my ego that's going like, oh, well, you can't lose to people. But
trying to preserve yourself.
And I'm trying to push hard against that and just go, go. You're grateful that you get to go do this stuff, and it's all good. And it's
When
so far been all good.
When
Yeah.
I was a new black belt, and I'm really glad that Carlos Machado told me this. It was like within the first week, he said, guard yourself against getting unfit because the jiu-jitsu allows you to win without being fit. It'll allow you to let other things go. It's a very powerful tool. And think of it, really, the jiu-jitsu starts at a black belt. So don't think about how you can beat blue belts and purple belts. Think about how now you can hang with your peers, the black belts, and you're just one of the black belts. So don't let yourself get lazy, unfit, or your ego all tied up in it. And just do it. Yeah.
That's another like plug for some people who are able to compete. Like if you're competing, you're probably not going to let yourself get unfit.
Yes.
And if you're, for whatever reason, choosing not to compete, you need to do exercise for exercise's sake,
Yes.
I believe. And Chris,
Not
I
just
know
for
Chris
jiu,
doesn't do
yeah.
it that much.
No.
I do it a bit more,
Yeah.
but I think it's important because your jiu-jitsu is your jiu-jitsu and your exercise is what keeps you fit.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel that.
If you're not competitively training.
Yeah.
And you have to both separate that in order to recombine it.
Yeah.
If you're always trying to carry them both on the mat, your fitness, your attributes, and the jiu-jitsu, it's too knotted up. You have to pull them apart and like see where, like, you don't realize it. We end up all walking in this hunched over a grappling mode.
Not healthy.
Not healthy. It's like one of the lines I heard a wrestler say this decades ago is when he's off the mat, walk around as if he's in the NBA. You know, pull your shoulders back, stick your neck out, like exactly how you don't want to wrestle, and walk with some bounce in your step, and have that like I'm going to throw a ball, I'm going to be able to reach, like do the opposite of what we do on the mat, in order to balance it, not just our wrestling but our life.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's why surfing is such a good like synergistic activity
You're right,
for
'cause
training.
it's opposite.
Yeah, because
Your
your body,
head's like this
your upper
when you're
body goes
paddling,
in there.
yeah.
And my shoulders have gotten all jacked up over the last couple of years. I haven't been surfing.
Yeah,
I surfed the other day though for the first time in a long time. It was awesome.
that is
Good.
awesome. But there were waves all week.
Yeah,
last
finding
week.
some
been a lot of
kind
swell,
of, I mean, most people probably don't live where there's
the
surfing
beach, yeah.
accessible, but finding some kind of thing, whether it's
Swimming.
yoga, swimming, some kind of
Tennis, anything.
well, maybe tennis, but like doing weightlifting exercises. There's a lot
Weights,
of things that are easily accessible that people can do that don't even, it's even like 15 minutes a day or less that could benefit and help open up their body so that you don't get stuck with jiu-jitsu posture and
Yes.
like be a, like, I don't want to say it, but be kind of hunched over when you're old.
Yeah.
Because like it's a thing that
It
happens
is a
and
thing.
we have to protect ourselves extra, I think, against that.
Yeah.
Yes, and a lot of us, like I know I have some family genetics that tends to hunch over, and
Yeah.
it's important. Like when I drive, and I'm always here where it's audio only, but I try to press my head back against the headrest.
Yep. Elongate
and
your cervical
elongate
spine,
everything.
your neck. Ooh.
Cool. Well, I think that's some good talk about ego. I think I feel a little more clear as to like what ego is actually from talking right now. And I think I like the thinking of it as a good thing and a bad thing. It just needs to be considered constantly. And you need to think about your sense of self. And if you're doing unhealthy things like thinking about other people as less than you, you know, being selfish in your exchanges with people, these are things to look out for, some pitfalls where maybe the development of your ego might be going in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Things don't go your way, you fall apart. That's a signal.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about people that I've known, like where they lose in a jiu-jitsu setting and they just like
Freak out.
freak out and
I've
stop
done it.
training or whatever.
I didn't stop training. I freaked out.
Yeah.
But I
have too.
learned,
Was
right?
that
Yeah,
blue or purple
I did it
belt?
when I was a blue
Yeah,
belt,
blue belt.
but I learned. And then when I saw other people do it, I was like, okay, I'm not the only one that does this,
Yeah.
first of all. And I grew through it because
You're
I
also like,
never
I
did it
don't wanna
again.
be that
And
person.
I don't want to be that person. Also, Chris scolded me like I was a child.
You it's okay to make mistakes, right? And I think part of living is making mistakes and growing, right?
Yeah.
But if you just let your ego get out of control and then you flip out and don't learn,
But like
right?
with
Then that's not good.
Yeah.
Melissa's experience, who did no organized competitive sports growing up, a lot of people they learn those hard
When they're like
lessons.
6.
Yeah.
I had never done any sports really at all.
And I
So-
really do believe, and don't worry, my Brazilian jiu-jitsu friends, I love you out there. Like, I distinctly noticed that jiu-jitsu people, unlike other sports, did not win with class. It was a very, like, beat your chest, rip your gi off, like it's. And I know it like came about in that kind of 90s period where all of a sudden being an egomaniac was cool. Like it was in our music and our art, like being, whether you're a rock star or a hip hop star, you lean into it. Look how cool I am. It was this kind of cultural shift where like for me, I conservatively longed for that past where a medal was small and you bowed before you fought. You shook your opponent's hand. Win, lose, or draw, you do it with class and grace. Like, that seemed to really leave the combat sports. They became these, like, our heroes were acting like dickheads with whether they won or lost. And I think that it influences culture, and our culture has become this kind of gross pro wrestling thing. Like, I know people grew up out there, they loved watching pro wrestling. I get it, the drama and all that. It's a story where all of a sudden people change and it's fun watching them change. Like, I get the soap operatic reason why it's cool. But at the same time, I think it's a dangerous phenomenon in our culture.
I feel like that's a part of American culture.
Yes.
And I almost wonder if like the explorer, voyager, conquistador mindset that led to the Western world requires that.
It might.
Because think about the group of guys living in old Europe.
Yeah.
And they go, fuck this. We could do this shit way better.
Yeah.
Let's get on this boat and cruise out across the flat earth. And that's a lot of ego. That's a overinflated sense of self instead of being a humble citizen of the land that you're in. And I think that's a crucial part to make that happen. One
of my proud British friends told me years ago, he said, after we were having an argument about England and America, he's like, what language are you speaking? I'm like, English. And he said, when England colonized the world, we sent our religious to America. We sent our intellectuals to New Zealand, our criminals to Australia, and the stubborn stayed home. And there's, obviously that's a simplistic view, but and certainly the second half of European migration to the Americas brought the adventure spirit, the independence. I don't want a king. I don't want anyone telling me what to do. Like what gave rise to our Constitution, which revolutionized the world, is that spirit of new growth. Like all men are created equal. We hereby declare that where it was a very enlightened thing where for 10,000 years people are just born into royalty or aristocracy. and they by their ego deserves the right to be above you in a hierarchy. And here is this American idea that, like, and of course at first it was only property owning white men, but that idea is what gave rise to every other battle in history where people have fought for equality. And
Yeah, it's like a
I think it's a good thing.
a virtuous pursuit of humility.
Yes.
That's but the action of making all that happen required a lot of ego.
It did. It
Right?
required a lot of ego.
And
yes.
so, again, it's about having your ego in check constantly and considering your values, right?
I believe so.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
All right. I'm just checking the time here. We got to keep it
All
high
right.
and tight, right?
Let's wrap it up. Yep.
Let's wrap it up. we have a queue that's pretty long, so maybe we should save this for another day.
Let's save it. Yeah, if it's really long.
It's really long. So just real quick, what's going on out there? We got the camp coming up, right?
Camp is coming
We
up
do
in
have
the
the
summer.
combat-based camp.
Summertime and the living's easy. Get your tickets now so you can enjoy the early bird discount.
It's
July
gonna be a
18th through 20th.
Fun adventure. I'm going to humbly teach you moves that will make you a badass.
This seems super egotistical of you to just put on your own camp.
I know.
Yeah, Chris.
It
Jeez.
does, like,
How could you do that, Chris?
Why do I think I'm so good?
Yeah, Chris is just putting on his own camp.
with humility.
Actually, he's not. Actually,
Melissa puts
I'm the
them on.
CEO
Yeah.
and I organize things and I just tell Chris when to show up.
Yep.
I
that's
plan
true.
the schedule. I ask, because I have such a big ego, I need to let you know who's in charge. Just kidding. I'm actually just like, I think, I mean, Chris, I don't think Chris has a super huge ego when it comes to being a jiu-jitsu instructor. And that's maybe why we don't get as many seminars.
I would
So
argue
come
that
to
you
our
have
camp.
a healthy ego. That's what
Yeah,
I'd
but
argue.
I mean, there's people who are out there trying to get after it.
I think
and
that's
because they're
arrogance,
so
though, like we
cool,
talked- yeah.
they're like, I'm so cool, you got to learn from me because I know the real jujitsu and let
Yeah.
me teach you because you don't know and I got to teach you what you don't know.
That
And in
looks like
some
insecurity
ways,
to me.
but in some ways, those people they're putting themselves out there more.
They
So
are.
that's going to result in more
They are
stuff.
self-promoting.
They're self-promoting. So we don't self-promote. We put things together. We somewhat passively advertise for them. And if you want to come, that's great. And if you don't, that's great too. We're happy either way.
It's
But
gonna be sick.
we got to feed ourselves. So we're
Yeah,
going
it's
to
gonna
just
be
keep trudging
Yeah.
along and
super
offering
rad.
some stuff that hopefully you guys find valuable. So,
And I always find,
That's it.
and I learned this from my mentors, to include Hegan, Carlos, Hickson, and all that, is when they teach, they are curious how you do it and like what you do to, like, they're always a student. They're not just the I know everything guy. And when you're new and you see your idols being humble learners, that's a better lesson than being new and seeing your idol as, oh, I know everything. I can't learn anything from those other guys, right? That's a
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap it up now. Stay on time.
let's do it.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Pound, like, and subscribe.
我把跟毅力、一步一个脚印，把前人推大视野。
Well, we all have targets